They say every fairy tale begins with once upon a time, but this one starts with a single video. It wasn't some polished press junket or glamorous red carpet appearance. Instead, it was a raw, intimate moment. A young actress sitting in her bedroom, phone in hand, voice trembling between frustration and defiance. Rachel Zegler, once hailed as the next Hollywood darling, poured her heart out in a clip meant to defend her latest project, a live-action reimagining of Snow White. She wanted to reclaim control of her narrative. What she got instead was a digital firestorm that consumed her reputation faster than anyone could have predicted. The internet can be unpredictable. One moment, everyone is showering you with praise. The next, they're tearing you apart with memes and hashtags. In Rachel's case, the shift was instant. Minutes after she posted her defiant message, reaction videos took off. Clips of her emotional plea ricocheted across every social platform as critics, fans, and casual onlookers dissected every single word. Some found it self-centered, others found it weirdly vulnerable, but most just found it ripe for mockery. By now, you've probably seen snippets of that viral meltdown. TikTokers stitching the original footage, layering comedic skits or sarcastic commentary over her quavering voice. YouTubers releasing reaction videos titled Snow White's Downfall or From Disney Darling to Disney Disaster. Even the typically stoic corners of the internet, where people pretend they're too cool for gossip, couldn't resist chiming in. Everyone wanted to weigh in on the big question: how did it all go wrong so quickly? Rachel's intention was clear. She wanted people to know she was human, to remind them that despite the hate swirling online, she was still an artist worth respecting. People still line up to see the winged victory at the Louvre, she had said, comparing herself to a damaged masterpiece that the public loves regardless of its flaws. But that one line became an instant magnet for backlash. Critics slammed it as tone-deaf. Memesters twisted it into endless jokes about a self-proclaimed masterpiece. Before long, the phrase "people still line up" was trending, laced with sarcasm and accusations of arrogance. But that was only the beginning. Within hours, every corner of the internet had latched onto the controversy. Privileged, out of touch, and entitled were some of the kinder words being tossed around. Others were less polite, calling her everything from a narcissist to the worst Disney casting choice in decades. Hashtags like Snowflop started spreading, a harsh reference to the film's rumored budget and shaky box office prospects. As the chatter escalated, so did the skepticism surrounding the entire project. Disney's live-action Snow White had been under the microscope from the moment Rachel's casting was announced. She was supposed to be the fresh, modern face of a classic princess story, a new generation's Snow White, more independent, more outspoken, less reliant on a prince. But for longtime Disney fans, the changes weren't just progressive. They felt dismissive of the original 1937 film's heart and soul. Then came opening weekend, which would serve as the film's true trial by fire. With a massive reported budget of $250 million, Disney needed a blockbuster. What they got was an opening haul of about $43 million domestically, paltry by the studio's lofty standards. Compared to the recent Little Mermaid remake, which opened at a respectable $95 million amid its own controversies, Snow White was on pace to become one of Disney's most shocking underperformers in recent years. Almost immediately, major theater chains started removing the film from their biggest screens, shunting it to early or late showtimes that attract far fewer viewers. By the second week, some smaller venues dropped it entirely. This wasn't just another underwhelming release. It was rapidly becoming a cautionary tale about what happens when negative buzz collides with a nostalgic property. Audiences who chose to watch the movie didn't just weigh in on the final product, they dredged up old interviews, searching for any clip or quote that could illuminate the actress behind the role. And they found plenty. Rachel's interviews during the film's promotional tour quickly became their own lightning rod. She had, on multiple occasions, referred to the original prince as the guy who literally stalks her, labeling the 1937 classic as weird, creepy, and so evidently from another era. She laughed off the romantic aspects, insisting she didn't dream of true love in this version. At the time, it might have felt like a progressive take, an effort to modernize a vintage fairy tale. But once the backlash started, those clips were recontextualized as smug, dismissive, and downright insulting to a beloved piece of animation history. It's worth noting that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs wasn't just any Disney film, it was the Disney film, the one that started it all. Released in 1937, it was Walt Disney's first feature-length animated project, an achievement achievement that shaped the entire landscape of animation and family entertainment. For many fans, messing with that legacy and mocking its innocence was like stepping on sacred ground. They didn't see a forward-thinking actress taking creative risks. They saw someone belittling a cherished cultural artifact. The friction that might have been forgiven with a more respectful tone became impossible to ignore once the film's numbers stalled. Suddenly, the Meltdown video and the film's flop were inseparable. Online discussions about one always led to the other, and reaction videos started racking up views. The topic became a goldmine for pop culture commentators, each piling on with theories about Disney's strategy, the actress's perceived hubris, and the pitfalls of reimagining a fairy tale in a way that seemingly alienated its core audience. Yet this debacle wasn't just about an actress overplaying her hand. The narrative around Rachel only grew darker when the Oscars rolled around. She was scheduled to appear on stage alongside her co-star, the legendary Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen in the film. For Hollywood watchers, this was supposed to be a golden moment. Two powerful women from the same high-profile movie taking center stage at the industry's biggest night. Instead, it became a spectacle of awkward body language and forced smiles. Gal Gadot, known for her poise and star power, barely interacted with Rachel. Tabloids pounced on every freeze frame and snippet of small talk, claiming the tension was palpable and the distance intentional. That moment under the Oscars spotlight was supposed to be Rachel's chance to pivot the narrative, to come across as poised, gracious, and maybe even self-reflective. Instead, it crystallized what the internet had been speculating for weeks, that Rachel was increasingly isolated, not just by the audience, but possibly by her own co-stars. Rumors swirled that Gal Gadot had been politely distancing herself from the project, fulfilling her contractual obligations, but otherwise steering clear of the controversy. The contrast was stark. Gal seemed to maintain her A-list status without a dent, while Rachel was left grappling with a snowballing image problem. Industry insiders began to whisper about the potential repercussions for Rachel's career. After winning a Golden Globe for her role in West Side Story and being touted by Steven Spielberg as a major talent, she seemed destined for the A-list. Directors and producers apparently had her on their shortlist for upcoming franchise films and prestige dramas. Yet as the Snow White backlash continued to gain momentum, those same insiders started to hesitate. Could Rachel still carry a movie? Or had she become box office poison? PR experts weighed in, saying that once an actress's name becomes synonymous with negative buzz, it can take years and a lot of goodwill to rehabilitate her brand. The real kicker came when insiders suggested that nobody in Hollywood was stepping up to defend her. Unlike other stars who rally behind their friends during tough times, Rachel got radio silence. No tweeted endorsements from fellow actors, no heartfelt Instagram stories from directors praising her work ethic, no public statements from producers reassuring fans that she was still their top pick. The hush was deafening. It hinted that the town was collectively backing away, cautious not to associate themselves with someone who had become a lightning rod for controversy. It's not that other stars haven't faced backlash before. Hollywood history is littered with names who had to fight their way back from an online fiasco. The difference is that the window for redemption often hinges on one key ingredient: humility, a heartfelt apology, a show of growth, a willingness to laugh at one's past mistakes. These gestures can change the narrative practically overnight, but Rachel didn't lean into that path. Instead, she doubled down. She posted cryptic messages about empowerment, slammed the hate, and seemed more combative than remorseful in every public appearance. Fans, or at least the ones who were still on her side, argued that she was merely standing her ground. They praised her for not caving to internet bullies. But from a mainstream perspective, the attitude read as arrogance. When celebrities speak from a place of perceived superiority, the internet responds by pulling them down a peg. And because Rachel's meltdown was so widely shared, people who hadn't even planned to see Snow White found themselves with a strong negative opinion of its lead actress. That's how powerful a bad viral moment can be. The meltdown also dragged up secondary controversies, like the fervent debates over whether classic fairy tales should be modernized, or if that tarnishes what made them beloved in the first place. Disney had sold the idea that Snow White 2020's edition would be more progressive, more relatable to girls today, less about romance, more about self-discovery. In theory, that sounds appealing. In practice, the way Rachel discussed it felt dismissive of the original's charm. She spoke about the prince in a mocking tone, implying the original storyline storyline was antiquated at best and offensive at worst. That commentary struck a nerve with the older generation, who introduced their children and grandchildren to the 1937 film. Even many younger viewers felt that her approach was condescending and lacked the nuance required to update a classic for modern times without completely undermining its roots. As the box office numbers continued to plummet, the discussion shifted from "Is Snow White any good?" to "Is Rachel Zegler's career over?" Drama channels and film analysts started comparing her situation to other high-profile missteps in Hollywood. Some pointed out that occasionally, an actor recovers from one fiasco by securing a breakout role that reshapes public perception. But with Rachel, the door seemed to be closing fast. In a business that thrives on hype and star power, negative press can make studios wary of investing in someone's future. Behind the scenes, rumor had it that her team was scrambling. They needed a redemption arc, some grand gesture that would put the fiasco behind her. Maybe a heartfelt open letter expressing regret over her dismissive comments. Maybe a philanthropic venture that aligned her with a cause, spotlighting her humility. Or maybe a lighthearted interview where she'd poke fun at her meltdown and promise she was learning from her mistakes. But nothing materialized. Instead, she stayed the course, defiant, critical of the backlash, and adamant that she had been misunderstood. Before long, the conversation grew bigger than Rachel Zegler or Snow White. It became emblematic of a larger cultural tension, the struggle between updating beloved stories for a modern audience versus honoring the history and nostalgia they carry. On one hand, you have the argument that these tales should evolve with the times, reflecting contemporary values. On the other hand, there's the perspective that by altering them too aggressively or trashing their earlier versions, you're discarding what made them resonate for generations. Rachel unintentionally placed herself at the center of this debate, and it wasn't a pleasant place to be. Meanwhile, comparisons to The Little Mermaid, which also faced scrutiny for its casting choices, revealed a stark difference in reception. While that film had its share of pre-release controversy, its lead actress handled interviews with a more diplomatic, respectful tone toward the original story. Audiences might have had mixed feelings about changes to the beloved Ariel, but they didn't feel personally attacked or spoken down to by the star at the center of it all. That's an important distinction. Even if fans aren't thrilled with every creative decision, they can still rally behind a performer who shows reverence for the material. Once the dust settled enough for clearer heads to weigh in, industry veterans couldn't help but lament the missed opportunity. Rachel Zegler, with her stunning voice and strong screen presence, had been poised to become a major force in Hollywood. She had Steven Spielberg's stamp of approval from West Side Story. She had a Golden Globe in hand. She had been chosen by Disney to bring one of the most iconic princesses to life. That's a trifecta of endorsements rarely bestowed on a newcomer. But all of that promise unraveled in a matter of months due to a few controversial interviews, a poorly received meltdown video, and a film that underperformed so dramatically it became a meme. Now, some people argue that the backlash might be out of proportion, that an actress in her early 20s shouldn't be vilified for wanting to reinvent a classic. There's truth in that. The internet can be unforgiving, often latching onto a single narrative and amplifying it without mercy. But where Rachel lost goodwill was in how she responded to the criticism, less with humility and more with overt frustration and scorn. In a public-facing industry, perception is paramount, and once the public collectively decides you're unlikable, it's an uphill battle to change that. No one can say for sure what the future holds for Rachel. It's possible that, given time, a new project could help her reclaim her image. Perhaps she'll nail a role in a smaller indie film, give a knockout performance, and remind everyone why she was so celebrated to begin with. Or maybe she'll pivot to a completely different path, perhaps Broadway, where her vocal talents and stage presence could shine without the baggage of cinematic controversies. Hollywood is a land of second chances, but only for those who play the long game and show some contrition. For now, she remains a polarizing figure, someone who, less than 2 years ago, was heralded as the next big thing. As audiences continue to dissect the Snow White fiasco, her name pops up in debates about entitled celebrities and misguided franchise reboots. The meltdown video is still circulating, still providing fodder for reaction channels and comedic remixes. Some fans are hopeful she'll learn from the experience. Others are convinced her career has permanently stalled. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, waiting to unfold in real time. Disney, for its part, seems keen to shift focus onto its future slate, quietly letting Snow White fade from the limelight. The film's short theatrical run and underwhelming box office are both testaments to how even the most storied entertainment empire can't force audiences to embrace a product they find off-putting. And Rachel's meltdown, while captivating in its drama, stands as a stark reminder no amount of star power or corporate backing can protect you once social media turns against you. When you strip it all away though, this story is about one person's struggle to handle an onslaught of negativity in a hyper-connected age. Rachel Zegler's meltdown didn't happen in a vacuum. It was fueled by a complex swirl of online expectations, generational shifts, brand loyalty, and a massive studio investment. People love a narrative, hero or villain, rise or fall, success or flop, and Rachel inadvertently gave them everything they needed to paint her as the antagonist in her own fairy tale. Will she find redemption? Hollywood history suggests it's possible, but only if she rethinks her approach, offers some humility, and gives people a reason to root for her again. After all, many stars have come back from worse. But until that day arrives, Rachel's saga serves as a cautionary tale for anyone stepping into the spotlight. When you rewrite a beloved fairy tale, you better know what story your audience actually wants to hear. And when the criticism comes, as it inevitably does, showing a little grace might keep you from becoming the villain of your own legend. In the end, the meltdown video that was meant to quiet the storm only stoked the flames higher. The fractured box office numbers, the cold reception from co-stars, and the relentless online memes combined into a perfect storm of negativity. Whether she deserved the brunt of it is almost secondary. What matters is that the damage has been done, and the curtain has dropped on a film that was supposed to be Disney's next big nostalgic revival. Instead, it will go down in history as a spectacular misfire, and the project that turned Rachel Zegler from a rising ingenue into an industry cautionary tale. Still, it's worth remembering that every downfall contains a lesson. For Rachel, it might be about balancing modern sensibilities with respect for the classics, or understanding that a little humility goes a long way when you're the face of a generation's new fairy tale. For Disney, it might be a reminder that reboots come with risks, and alienating the core fan base can be a costly mistake. And for the rest of us, perhaps it's a reminder that real people exist behind these headlines and viral clips. What looks like entitlement could be youth and inexperience. What seems like arrogance might be a reaction to intense pressure, but public perception rarely waits for nuance. So here we are at the final pages of this cautionary tale, wondering if Rachel Zegler's story will have a second act. Will audiences forgive and forget in time? Will she pivot to roles that showcase her talent without the baggage of rewriting iconic characters? Will she offer an apology that resonates, or stick to her guns and hope that the storm passes? Only time will tell. For now, the best she can do is take a step back from the social media inferno, reassess her messaging, and find a way to remind the world why they ever lined up to see her in the first place. Because despite everything, there was a moment not too long ago when people believed she would be the next big star. She had the voice, the presence, and the youthful optimism that made Hollywood veterans smile and say, "This one's going far." That spark doesn't vanish overnight, but it can dim under the weight of controversy. If she finds a way to reignite it, the industry, and perhaps even the audience, may be willing to give her a second chance. Until then, her story stands as a real-life example of how quickly a fairy tale can turn into a cautionary saga when you lose sight of the magic that made it special in the first place.